everyone, to the April 23rd meeting of the El Segundo Planning Commission that I call to order. First up, roll call.
Commissioner Taylor,
Here.
Commissioner McCaverty,
Here.
Commissioner Christian,
Present.
Vice Chair Inga,
Here.
and Chair Magai.
Present.
We have quorum.
And as always, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we always start with public communication. Do we have anyone in the audience that wants to make public comment on an item that is not on the agenda today? Okay, so we will close public communications. And up first, we have our consent item, which is to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from March 26th. Do we have a motion to approve?
I present the motion.
Second.
And I'll take votes. Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner McCaverty,
Aye.
Commissioner Christian,
Aye.
Vice Chair Inga,
Aye.
and Chair Magai.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great thing. And I should give the commission a heads up that I do have to leave early today at around 6:15-ish, but we will have quorum if I do leave, and I will announce myself for the record if I do, but we only have one public hearing item, so we may make it in time. So moving to that item, public hearings, ordinance amending Title 15 of the El Segundo Municipal Code to update and clarify definitions, permitted uses, and development standards in various zones. It's called a cleanup ordinance, and I believe Paul's making a presentation.
Okay. All right. Good evening, Chair Magai and fellow commissioners. This item before you is, as you said, a zoning code cleanup ordinance. We have been doing cleanup ordinances for the last few years. The purpose behind them is to just continuously look to improve the zoning code when we get opportunities, to clarify unclear provisions in the code, simplify standards, and generally speaking, sort of streamline the code, make it easier for everyone to use, the residents, developers, staff. Just in similar sessions with you on cleanup ordinances, we'll be going through the proposed changes in sort of categories and that you see on the screen on this slide. And we will have a kind of a special separate discussion on the topic of rooftop decks at the end. We don't have a specific recommendation for the commission in the ordinance. We wanted to take the time and have a discussion with you before crafting a final recommendation. So with that, we'll jump right into the proposed changes in the ordinance. And I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can, but feel free to ask me any specific questions on language and so forth. So under the definition section of the code, we're clarifying several definitions, including the definition of accessory building to add pools in that list of structures just to make sure that they're covered by setback standards. Updating the definition of junior ADUs to incorporate some new language required by state legislation on how you measure it using livable space. Clarifying the definition of animal boarding. Clarifying the definition of fitness center to sort of add examples of sort of amenities and uses that can be found in fitness centers and gyms. Things like a pool or sport courts, studios for fitness or classes and so forth. Making some changes to floor area definitions, deleting a redundant definition of floor area and to rely instead on gross and net floor area in the code. Updating the definition of gross floor area to bring it a little closer to the state building code definition for gross floor area, just to make it life easy for architects and staff when we are measuring projects and buildings. Adding some restrictions to home occupations, specifically related to home-based car sharing businesses. We've had sort of an uptick in sort of activity in that particular home-based type of business, we wanted to include some restrictions. That way, homeowners kind of are aware of what the restrictions are on that type of business. And then incorporating the definition of livable space that comes straight out of a recent state law. Also added a definition of mixed-use project to the to the municipal code. As you're aware, in the last few years, we've done some major sort of rezoning in the city, and we've expanded the areas where mixed-use projects are allowed. But we didn't include a definition in the code and we want to do that now just to make sure exactly what we mean when we say mixed-use projects. Moving on, making a small clarification to the general office definition, to the definitions of recreational facilities, and adding a new definition for small studios for art and fitness. Those uses are very popular, and cities generally have a hard time placing them and deciding where they should be permitted and under what circumstances. We had a similar, challenge, and we thought about adding a specific definition for these uses and some standards, and we'll go over this particular topic a little bit later on in some other sections of the presentation. Moving on to the general provisions chapter in the code, a couple minor things, just correcting a code reference in the section on exceptions to building height, updating the definition, the restrictions on temporary buildings, specifically to allow the use of those shipping containers in single-family and R2 zones just during construction. If a contractor wants to have a place to store materials securely, or if they want to have an office on site, we added this as an option for homeowners and developers with restrictions.
So how do you define shipping cargo containers exactly?
I did not define shipping or cargo containers in the code itself. I just think of it from a sort of a, what would you call it? Sort of a common sense kind of understanding of what it is.
Just because they're the ones that are the pods that look like just smaller versions of a shipping container than are the traditional 20-foot and 40-foot shipping containers, which are
Yeah. The sizes vary actually for shipping containers. They can be down to like 10 by 10, 10 by 20, or 8 by 20, up to even 40 feet in length. So in the code language, we added restrictions to allow a single one on the site, and we limited it to a certain size. We saw that there is a demand, so we thought we would address that. It wasn't clear in the code, so that was the purpose behind that.
And you mentioned you're going to get to the fitness centers, but I saw that was kind of, there were two sections where that was changed. Just want to make sure that.
That's right. We added a definition, and then we are also adding studios for art and fitness in the permitted uses in commercial zones.
Okay.
And then we are also proposing a parking standard for them. And that would clarify for anyone, where they are permitted, which zones, and then what the standards will be for those businesses, which are kind of hard to categorize usually, but we think we found a pretty good approach to that. That covers the general provisions of the code and the ordinance. In the residential zones, we've made several changes. Number one, we've clarified the encroachments into the front yard setback in all three of our residential zones. We did some clarifications regarding the language for floor areas. We've noticed in the residential zones, there's different terms used for floor area, and we wanted to kind of standardize thing and sort of adopt the gross floor area term so there's no confusion about how you measure floor areas. And we've added minimum front yard landscaping requirements in the R2 zone that lacked those standards. And we simply copied what is in the R1 zone. So establishing sort of a minimum percentage area that must be landscaped, and then carrying over the requirement for at least one tree in the front yard with new development on an R2 lot. So we're trying to match the R1 standards. There were no specific percentage limitations in the R2 zone, and staff felt that that might create a situation where somebody can pave over their entire front yard in the R2 zone, and we want to make sure it's addressed very clearly in the code. It was just missing in the code, yeah. Moving on to the next few sections, we made proposed several changes regarding ADUs and JADUs, the standards for those units. Most of these changes are there in order to comply with recent state law. And there are a few changes that we, as staff, initiated just to make the code a little bit clearer to understand and more streamlined. A couple of examples from the state law are adopting that livable space definition, incorporating it into those two chapters, establishing some process requirements or minimum 15-day deadline for staff to review applications. That way, you know, the applications are expedited. The cities don't take too long to review the applications. Establishing clearly rights to appeal city decisions on ADUs and JADUs. Clarifying the minimum rental term, and a few other standards just to incorporate state law into our code. Moving on, in the chapter or article on urban lot splits and two-unit developments, we wanted to clarify certain things. For instance, regarding the front yard setback requirements. There are standards in there today, but because the urban lot splits kind of uniquely sort of separate the two lots by creating one lot that it faces the street and one that is behind it, it was a little unclear what the front yard setback requirements were for that rear lot that we're creating, you know, whether it should provide that 20-foot or 22-foot setback. So we added language to clarify some of those things that were not 100% clear. Moving on, in the commercial and industrial zones, we did not propose a lot of changes. We simply, as I mentioned earlier, added those small-scale studios as permitted uses in the C2, C3, and C4 zones. And added some restrictions to a use that is only allowed in the CO zone, office worker-oriented services. The restrictions have to deal with their size and then their location. There's a restriction on having them in the frontage along major streets like PCH and El Segundo Boulevard. Actually, these restrictions were in the code in the past when we added this use to the code, but for some reason during one of our previous cleanups, it was omitted. So we're simply putting these restrictions back in the codes. For some reason, they were removed. So we're just kind of correcting that little error probably from staff's. And then in the industrial zones, permitted uses table, just correcting a reference to another code section just to make the code a little clearer. We proposed some changes to the mixed use and housing overlay parts of the code. The mixed use overlay and the housing overlay were adopted in 2024, about 2 years ago. And since then, we've had a little bit of interest from developers in putting projects in some of those designated sites. And so they've started to ask us questions. Well, what does this code section mean? And what does that mean exactly? And we realized that, okay, there's some areas that needed to be clarified in those new parts of the code. So we proposed clarifying that, for instance, that the commercial FAR, or density, in the mixed-use overlay is the same as that underlying zone. It wasn't 100% clear the way that MU overlay was written. and clarified some standards regarding sort of the massing and size of buildings to make sure that architects can read the code and apply it correctly. So the final area where we proposed changes in this ordinance is in the parking requirements. Briefly, just clarifying when additions to residential buildings trigger compliance with our parking standards, just making a small clarification there. As I mentioned earlier, we added a specific parking requirement for studios for art and fitness. That parking requirement is the same as essentially as our retail and service parking rate, because that's typically where these uses tend to go in our small commercial centers or our major commercial centers. So having a similar parking rate made sense in order to allow these businesses to move into a property. Yes.
So this would apply to the fitness studios and facilities that are like in Smoky Hollow as well?
This does not apply in the fitness studios in Smoky Hollow because there are specific provisions in the specific plan
Got it.
for those small fitness studios. Yeah.
Okay, so you said small, so is there a limit on the square footage?
There is a limit in this for the square footage is 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
Yes. Anything larger would, if it's a fitness studio, anything larger would essentially be treated like a gym, and have sort of different set of requirements and where it's permitted.
The one of the golf facilities is pretty big though. Would that be larger than the?
The golf facility, are you referring to one that recently opened in
Yeah.
Smoky Hollow?
Yeah.
I believe that was still under that limit.
Okay.
But it's something that I would have to go back and check because I don't remember the plans right now off the top of my head.
Okay, so if it did trigger that if it was over the limit, it would get the same kind of parking requirements as something like Live Love, which is at
Plaza Segundo.
what's that?
In Plaza Segundo?
Yeah, in Plaza El Segundo, which that's to me that's a commercial area which this would fit well with. But then something like in Smoky Hollow that triggers size, that's not like a commercial area that should.
Yeah, in Smoky Hollow, when it comes to fitness studios, the smaller ones are permitted by right without any special process. But if they exceed that limit, they have to go through the conditional use permit process. So there is a way to
Okay, so we can
permit them, but they have to go through additional steps.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but this ordinance does not affect those uses in Smoky Hollow. Yeah. And then finally, the last change has to do with mixed-use projects. Again, because we allow more areas to have mixed-use projects, mixed uses, our parking standards, meaning sort of how you design your parking lot and your parking area, today tend to apply to either residential uses or to commercial uses. So when you mix them, applying different standards to the same facility can be a little confusing. Last year, we brought a director determination to you where we recommended treating mixed-use projects the same as commercial uses, essentially, so that we have consistent sort of parking standards applied to a development. And this is our opportunity to make it formal and add it to the municipal code. Now that covers all the specific recommendations we have in our draft ordinance. I wanted to pause here for a second and see if you had any questions about what I went over. I kind of raced through it, so I just want to make sure I give you a second before we go into the second part of our presentation and the discussion on rooftop decks.
What's a home-based car sharing business? I'm so curious what that is.
Turo. Yes, so, yes.
Easy enough.
Okay, great. That answers that question pretty easily. I can move on, and if something comes up later on, you can definitely come back and we can discuss anything that I've covered already. So with that, I'll just go ahead and move on to the second part of the presentation and the topic of rooftop decks. Great. So just briefly, as we stated in our staff report, the issue is The municipal code has few provisions dealing with rooftop decks. And those few provisions can lead to different interpretations of how and where they are permitted. And it's something that even we staff sometimes have to deliberate on or are challenged by. So we wanted to bring this topic to you. We have some ideas on potential ways to handle this. We just want to go over sort of what are the main or general questions that we would like to address, and then go into show you some of those specific mentions of rooftop decks in the code. Talk to you a little bit about how we've applied the code to date, and then give you kind of a general recommendation and open it up to a discussion and hear from you. So the main questions that we hope to answer today is, which zones do we want to permit rooftop decks in? Do we want to allow them in narrow lots and wide, larger lots? Do we want to allow them on primary residential structures or accessory or both? Regarding the height, would we allow them above the first floor or even above the second floor? And then whether they should have the same setbacks as other structures or add sort of additional setbacks for rooftop decks. That's just the general questions that we wanted to hopefully address.
So when we say it's unclear, so we don't have any restrictions right now, or any?
That's exactly what I'm going to go over today, next. So in the next few slides, I will go over where the rooftop decks are addressed in the municipal code. And in our view, rooftop decks are not adequately addressed. We as staff have, in practice, permitted rooftop decks in different circumstances, and we just want to talk to you about what the code says, where we as staff over the years have permitted rooftop decks, and then potentially how should we formalize that in the code and update the code. So we'll go over what the code says about rooftop decks. So we'll go over some relevant code provisions. So there is a definition for a deck in the code. Essentially, it's a walking surface or outdoor gathering area, typically extending outward from a house. That kind of talks about the at-grade decks typically. There's no definition specifically for rooftop decks. A relevant code provision has to do with how we define building height and how we measure it. I underlined the phrase, the highest point of the roof or parapet. That's sort of the highest point. That's where we measure building height from. And in our residential zones, we permit buildings with pitched roofs to be 32 feet in height, measuring all the way just to the top of that gable. And then in the case of flat roof buildings, we measure just at the very top, the top point of that roof, or if there was a parapet above, the maximum height of 26 feet for flat roofs would be measured to the top of that. There is a mention of rooftop decks in the exceptions to building height. So this paragraph here discusses all the different structures or equipment that can go above a roof and beyond the height limit. And it specifically mentions rooftop decks. It says that if you want to propose non-permanent accessories like umbrellas or furniture or barbecues on a roof deck, those are permitted up to a maximum of 8 feet above the height limits. So in this little diagram, you have a building and it has a deck at the top. It has a parapet, so the parapet is the highest point on the building. That's where you measure the maximum height that's permitted. And then you see the umbrella there on that deck. So that umbrella, according to the code, could exceed the height limit by up to 8 feet.
Can you go back to that?
Yeah.
So the 26 max height limit. So previous one, it was 26 was the roof, right?
The top of the gable, right?
No, on the flat roof.
On the flat
It
roof,
was
yes.
20, it was 26, right?
Yeah,
So technically, that roof there is below 26.
the
So
deck,
that
yeah.
max height is the roof, then the railing on top.
Yeah, so in the definition for building height, it says it's the vertical distance to the highest point over the roof or the parapet. So in theory, going back to that other image, the maximum, you have to fit even the parapet under the 26-foot limit.
So this could never go on a two-story building then?
On a two-story building,
Yeah.
it will be a tight squeeze. So if you could fit 2 stories in about, 20 feet,
Yeah.
then you could add a parapet on top.
And
Yes.
but a parapet wouldn't be 6 feet, right? That's
No, no, it
Okay,
doesn't,
so
and
it
it
could
doesn't have to be. Yeah, usually it has to
Okay.
be around 3.5 to 4 feet for protection purposes, so
Okay.
people don't fall over. Well, this is not the scale, yeah. This is not the scale because this is a single-story structure, but I just wanted to give you a sense of kind of where we measure the maximum height from, from our point.
Yeah, because if you use kind of what Paul's trying to convey here with the umbrella and take a mental snapshot of that umbrella and then go to the previous slide and put it on top of the other building, the one with the 2 stories, Paul,
Oh, okay, go back.
and put on top of that, what we're saying is your max height is 26 feet, then you could put an 8-foot, exactly.
You could put an umbrella on top of that second story, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah, if you were to like take the strict wording of how it's worded in there, but again, it has that provision for an allowance for certain things to go above the maximum height limit. So it just said, right,
That's right.
exactly. But that's the only area where it makes reference to a roof deck.
Yeah.
So then,
So we're trying to tell you that this is where rooftop decks are mentioned in the code. So in this case, it's in the context of an exception to the building height. The other section, and the only section where it's specifically referenced, and it says, okay, this is where rooftop decks are permitted, is in the next section. In the R1 zone, specifically on those lots that are wider than 25 feet, in the setback requirements for detached accessory structures. So if you have a garage or a storage shed or an ADU in the back separate from the house, on those buildings, the code has this language, and it says, rooftop decks are permitted with the required railings on single-story accessory structures or on top of the single-story portion of an accessory structure. So if a structure in the back has 2 stories, you could have a deck coming out of right above the first floor. And then it talks about the setback requirements for that rooftop deck. In other words, that protective railing has to have an additional setback beyond the minimum required for the structure itself. And I'll show you a little visual here. So if you look at that site plan, you'll see the primary building in the back, the detached structure in the back, and then on top you see I've dotted some railing for a deck on top of the single-story structure. So in the case of a lot, let's say 50 feet, the code requires the deck to be 10%, 10% the width of the lot, plus 2 more feet. So 5 feet in this case, plus 2 more, so 7 feet. The railing has to be stepped back from the property. So that's the,
So that 2 feet would be on that right side, the left side, and the top? The 2 feet buffer?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't quite understand.
So you're only showing the railing as 2 feet setback from the,
From the edge of the structure.
Yeah.
So the structure itself could be closer to the property line, but the deck above that first floor has to be stepped back more than the accessory structure. That's what the code says. So the ADU could be closer to the property line, but the
Okay.
deck on top of it has to be farther back, farther away. Yes, yeah.
Paul, is that because of the neighbors, for privacy?
Yes,
or-
so that goes into the intent. Why would the city incorporate this language in the code? And this goes back to a time when the city was concerned about things like mansionization and privacy issues in the R1 zone. And, you know, somebody would not necessarily like to have a detached accessory structure with a deck on top of it that overlooks somebody's backyard or their home. And you also need to keep in mind that in our residential zones, detached structures in the back third of a property are allowed to have a 0-foot setback. So, a storage shed, you know, or a garage in the back, for instance, could in theory go all the way up to that side property line. So the city definitely didn't want to have somebody standing right at the property line, you know, 10, 15 feet above the neighbor looking down. So that was kind of the perspective exactly.
This is interesting. So for ADUs, yeah, I think we've all seen probably a number of ADUs that that are like 3 stories with a deck on top. Here, I'm curious how those kind of.
ADUs with a deck on top. Now, I don't know if we've permitted ADUs with a deck on top of the second story. I believe we've permitted them with a deck on top of the first story. The ADU itself might have enclosed space on the first and the second floor, but we've permitted decks on the side, you know, on the side of that second floor, not above it. Yes. So that's what that's the one place in the code where it's very specific about rooftop decks being permitted, and then under what sort of restrictions or circumstances. And then you can kind of see the visual on the elevation there as well. Rooftop decks are also mentioned in the floor area ratio standards. There's references that talk about, you know, rooftop decks that are covered or uncovered, that count towards the maximum floor area ratio, although the language is not clear about is it permitted on a primary structure or an accessory structure. That part of the code is not clear. It just talks about when a rooftop deck counts towards the floor area of a building. So that is basically it as far as language in the code today. And so if you think of the zoning code as what we call a permissive ordinance, that only what is listed in the code is permitted, that sort of strict view of the code would limit rooftop decks to these circumstances only. Only in the R1 zone, only on wide lots, only on detached accessory structures, and only above the first floor of those detached structures with the additional setbacks that we talked about a little bit. So given the references to rooftop decks in the code, it would be a very narrow sort of set of rooftop decks that are permitted, the way the code reads today. Now, in practice, I'll show you some examples of areas where staff over a long time has approved rooftop decks beyond these strict limitations. So that goes to the next part of the presentation. So here's a couple examples. This is a property. You can see the 4 houses in a row here, and then decks on top, kind of sit back from the front of the property. This is on Standard Street in the R2 zone. So here we're deviating from what the restrictions we just looked at, right? We've permitted rooftop decks in the R2 zone and on top of the second floor of the primary structure. So different, very different from the strict language that you see in the code. Another example, this case, it's on Grand in Virginia in the R3 zone. This is a condominium project that has 3 units, and each unit, and as you can see here, the rooftop deck is kind of, you know, enclosed at the top, and, you know, in this particular case, the rooftop deck actually counts towards the required private open space requirement that each unit has to have.
So I'm gonna have to take off soon, but I do wanna know from a process standpoint. So this is all one item, right? But we have a lot of decisions to make on this. Is this
Yes.
gonna be, we have to decide on all of these questions
Well,
today, or-
we're gonna propose a few. I can jump ahead if you like. We can propose. We have some ideas to propose
Okay.
on how to amend the ordinance that you have before you to address this particular topic. And if it's okay with you, Chair, and the rest of the commission, I can jump ahead a little bit. So we have some recommendations. We've permitted this in the R2 and the R3 zone. And sort of jumping ahead, I've told you what our practice has been. And then, let me go to the next slide with our recommendation here. Forgive me. Okay, so here we go. So we could add a new definition on rooftop decks, and we have some suggested language here. Although we could just live with the current definition of a deck and simply understand that a rooftop deck is just a deck on top of a roof. Pretty simple. Either way would work. We recommend adding rooftop decks as a use permitted in the R1, the R2, and the R3 zones as an accessory use, like as a common part of a residence, but have some restrictions. So in the restrictions that we kind of covered the categories earlier, we would recommend, number one, allowing it in the R1, R2, and R3, allowing it on narrow and wide lots, on both the primary and accessory structures. But when it comes to the height, we would recommend not permitting it on top of primary dwellings in the R1 and on the wide lots.
On top of the second story of
On top of the second story, because in the other cases where we've approved rooftop decks, in the R3 zone, in the R2, those zones are generally kind of restricted when it comes to the amount of space that they have. They're allowed to have more units that take up more space on the property, leaving less open area on the ground. So it makes sense in those types of circumstances to allow somebody to put their outdoor open space on top of the building. Even in the R1 zone on the narrow lots, that would apply, because you have a very narrow lot. There's not a lot of space to put in a decent sized yard. So we would say that even in that case, we would recommend allowing it on the primary units. But in the rest of the R1 zone on the larger lots, there's a ton of space in the front yard and in the rear yard for people to just enjoy their yard. So it's not necessary to allow that. There is no restriction when it comes to open space. And in addition to that, staff believes, and you can confirm this, that our community, generally speaking, here in El Segundo, doesn't need to have extra usable space that high above the grade in the single-family residential zone. Where this community is a little different from a very urban area, or some of the other beach cities that have smaller lots, where they're trying to kind of fit in a lot on one small lot. So that's essentially the summary of our recommendation. And when it comes to additional setbacks, we would recommend including sort of the same language regarding detached accessory structures, because like I said earlier, in the R1, the R2, and the R3 zone, detached structures can go as close as 0 feet from the side property line.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to have a step back, for those decks on top of the first floor, of a detached structure. That is, in summary, our recommendation, but we want to kind of have the commission kind of tell us whether we're on the right track on this, the way we've been practicing this, and with our recommendation.
Right, and before you go into some deliberation, I just want to also kind of piece together some of the missing, summarize some of the missing topics that may have been missed in order for just for time purposes. Getting back to your question about the ordinance that's before you tonight, that is really the cleanup item. And, you know, we can move forward with that, or the commission can elect to move forward with that and forward that on to council as is, without any kind of mention of the rooftop deck or the roof deck issue. We just thought if this was kind of something that would be simple enough, if you will, that we could make some changes to add into this draft ordinance that's before you now, bring it back at the next meeting, and then kind of get your blessing after we kind of hear your feedback. But I think the really the important thing to really note is, as indicated as shown in Paul's presentation at the beginning, you know, there's kind of bits and pieces in our code that references a deck, that references a roof deck, but it's only allowed in certain cases. And then there's also the intent and kind of what we've, you know, all along have in terms of practice implemented how some of these decks are incorporated into residential structures. So, for example, when you talk about a roof deck, I mean, we definitely want you to understand that when we talk about a roof deck over a first story, it's usually something that's been is accessible via the second floor. It's, you know, and so it's part of the design of a house. So because of that, you know, that's something that in practice we've kind of allowed, even though it's not blatantly stated in the code, but we do see it as kind of an architectural relief that also provides for, you know, this usable area for folks, for property owners, R1 lots specifically, to use those areas as because absent any kind of like floor area below it, it would just be like a balcony, right? So you think of a balcony accessible from your second floor, except the only difference is a balcony, quote unquote, is open, it's not enclosed, whereas a roof deck is enclosed. You know, if you kind of think of it that way. So then the question then before you then is, in practice, we have not really received a whole lot of inquiry, nor have we really approved a whole lot of decks or roof decks on the top of a second floor. So if you have a 2-story house and someone comes in and wants to put a roof deck on top of that second story, you know, that's always been kind of the issue, like, okay, do we allow it, do we not? But we take into account, you know, the strict interpretation of the code, but then there's some conflict with other parts of the code with regards to height, and that little statement in the provisions that allow, you know, exceeding the height that references a roof deck. So is the roof deck allowed or is it not? So that's always something that we've been struggling with. But in practice, what we've said is, because, you know, kind of engaging the community and the issues in the past that we've heard about privacy issues especially, is we've taken more of a conservative approach and said, you know what, if someone comes in with a deck on the second floor of their 2-story house, we're not going to allow that. Now, that may run contradictory to what you've seen before you when you see condominium complexes. And to what Paul was saying was that, you know, those are constraints when it comes to condominiums and multifamily development that an applicant has to contend with, not only providing common open space, but also a requirement to provide private open space. So because of those kind of, you know, conflicting, you know, or competing interests, you know, we've kind of taken the approach and we've come to the commission, and it's been approved where, in practice, we allow for decks that are on the second floor of a condominium type project to be used for compliance with the open space, private open space requirement. You really don't have that situation in the R1, so that's why, even though there's references to exceeding the height and roof deck, we've just kind of in practice said, no, in R1, on your regular sized lots, we're not gonna allow it on the second floor. And so that's kind of our practice. And if you agree with that, then that's something that we could easily kind of codify and bring that back to you. I think the main question is when it comes to kind of these narrower lots, these 25-foot wide lots that are in the R1, do we take that same approach where we don't allow it on the second floor, But we also have to acknowledge that there are limitations, even though there's no requirement for open space or private open space. There is kind of this similarity, if you will, to condominiums where they're kind of constrained by their site. And so if someone comes in and requests to build, a two-story house on a 25-foot wide lot, and you have all meeting all the setbacks, you're not gonna have a whole lot of open space. So would it be, out of this world to allow them, in those specific situations, to allow roof decks over the second floor roof? So I think that's really the kind of the two things. It's like, hey, this is how we've been doing it in practice with regards to these larger, wider lots in the R1, and this is how we've been implementing it in practice for the R3 and multifamily, where we do allow it on the very top roof. And if you concur with that, because that's really no different than what we've been doing in practice, we would just actually codify it and memorialize it through actual standards, and that would be blatantly clear in the code. So if that's your concurrence, that's great, and we can put that in and amend the draft ordinance and bring that back to you. So then the next question is, how would you like us to proceed with the narrow lots, and whether those should have that same kind of same limitations, or should we allow them that additional flexibility to allow for rooftop decks on the second highest floor?
Okay, thank you. We did receive a public comment on this, requesting that first-story rooftop decks be allowed on 25 feet or on lots that are 25 feet or less. And that's a little bit different with what you're describing. The commenter doesn't mention second story for 25-foot or less lots. But I do tend to agree with her that, and based on this, it's 25 foot or wider, right? So the commenter would be, if I'm assuming she has one of these lots that are narrower than 25 feet, that she would be excluded from.
Yeah, I interacted with this particular property owner, and she has a 25-foot wide lot, and she's interested in putting a rooftop deck on top of a detached accessory structure, on top of the first floor of a detached accessory structure. And the code doesn't have any language regarding that. It only addresses it on the wide lots. So she is, in her comment, would ask that the code allow the same sort of right or entitlement to someone with a narrow lot. Yeah.
Okay, so
Is that because we were going to tell her no, though?
That's what we did tell her, yes. Because on detached accessory structures, decks are only discussed in that context of the wide lots, yeah.
When we say wide lots, we're saying anything over 25 foot wide. Because there's a distinction between narrow 25-foot wide lots. I don't think there's anything narrower than 25.
Yeah.
So you either have a 25-foot wide lot, or you have wider lots. And so to Paul's point is, we had to tell her no, because if we take it to the letter of how the municipal code is written currently right now, the only provision that would allow for any kind of deck to exist on top of a roof, it would be only on a detached structure in the R1.
On a wide lot.
On lots that are wider than 25 feet. That would be.
I have to, that's right, I have to run.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna excuse myself, and Mario will take over. But I just want to add, I do want us to be flexible for these types of things. I don't like hearing that it's a hard no because of some obscure thing. And I do agree with her that because the lots are narrower, they could use extra outdoor space. So I think being flexible for these types of situations is really important. So with that said,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone.
And Mr. Vice Chair, as the chair is leaving, I believe this is a public hearing item, so I just want to make sure that we provided an opportunity for any members of the public to speak. I don't think we did that at the beginning of the item, so if we could just do that before we go too far down the path of deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any members that would like to? No?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Of course.
I was just gonna ask the rationale, if you know, because I don't know when this was written, on why wider lots could have the rooftop deck on a non-attached structure and not the narrower lots? Is it just because they're sandwiched in a little more, a privacy thing, or we have no idea, it was overlooked? I'm just curious.
We have the same question as you, because
Okay.
that language has been in the code, I think since the 90s. And not addressed elsewhere. I would, yes.
Counterintuitive a little in that wider lots have more outdoor space already. When somebody on a narrower lot,
Right, and I think to also to give some more context to what Paul's saying is that I think back in that time, these detached accessory structures were only limited to one story. It's this allowance of detached accessory structures allowed to go higher than, I think at the time they were only limited to
14 feet.
14 feet. So this allowance to go, for a detached structure to exceed 14 feet is a recent phenomenon, if you will. That was, I think, passed like in the 2016-ish, 2017, where the city did allow for detached accessory structures to go higher than that. And I think this particular issue was either not caught or not addressed, and so we have what we have now, unfortunately. And so, so now we're just trying to take this proactive step. And historically, like I said, this is how we've interpreted it in practice. Sorry.
So it's the difference, the distinction between the wide lots and the narrow lots.
the question I had was, did the, on the amendment to ADUs, are they held to the 26 feet as well? Okay, I must have missed that in the presentation. I used to live on Standard Street, 406 Standard, and there was an alley behind our house in between Standard and Eucalyptus, and we could see the park. And it was a skinny lot, so I'm guessing it was that 25-foot lot. And it was a long, skinny house, but off the bedroom in the back, there was a balcony, and it was above a garage though, but it's because the house was like on this angle and like went down. So I'm presuming our house was considered a one-story house, and that's how that balcony.
Well, that would be a deck if it's over other usable
Yes,
space.
it was a deck. Well, it was
Yes.
over the garage.
And I think that staff at the time very easily could have interpreted the code to allow that, because it's just kind of the same thing as what a balcony would be over coming out of the second floor of the building. Yeah, over the backyard.
So it feels like this is just overlooked, like a little black hole in our code,
Yeah.
little void.
It has been a thorn in our side.
Yeah, and I do feel bad for this person. Okay. And you like, as you were talking, you were saying the way I was interpreting it in my brain, you're just trying to codify it so that you don't have to make these tough calls and adhere to a strict letter of the law that might not be in the best interest of everybody. Okay.
I like the theme of consistency. So it certainly seems like on the 25, the narrower lots, being able to have a first story rooftop deck. I guess I get stuck on the rooftop part because it's not
Yeah.
really on the roof, right? Like if we're like in some of these are not really rooftop, it's just a deck in between, but whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's not a rooftop, right?
Yeah, the way I think about it is if you have a building that has
Well, if there's something above
first
it,
floor
like-
and a second floor, if the first floor kind of stuck out more, it would have a roof, right?
I mean, the garage has a roof, so I guess you're
Exactly.
right.
So
It's like if
yeah,
they
so
have an
that's kinda-
attached
that's what
doghouse,
helps
it also
me
has a
understand
roof.
it. Yeah, that's what helps me kind of understand the rooftop concept, even,
No,
even above a first floor.
I think that part is fine. I don't really have an objection there. I think my questions are more, we allow rooftop decks on a second story, or we do not?
Over
way-
the second story, on top of the second
On
story,
top of the second story.
we have in practice allowed for those
Yes.
only in condominium and multifamily developments. Not in R1.
And what's the logic there? Like, so to see where I'm trying to get to, what's the difference between a narrow condo where we've decided they need to have additional rooftop living area, and the skinny mini lots that we're talking about, like what's the difference?
Well, I think that's the question before you,
Yeah,
but, right.
And
Yeah.
so if we would allow it there, why wouldn't we allow it?
That's the question before you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure, because
Yes.
I'm not against it. And then my other sort of follow-up question is, are there additional construction or safety standards related to these decks? Like the higher you go, it's got to be more, whatever, more foundation, more
Yeah.
bigger
Yeah.
beams, whatever the construction. I'm not the construction guy,
Yeah,
but
just
Yeah,
is
there are
more?
additional engineering issues because,
Okay.
you know, a regular kind of flat roof, if you will, even though it could function as, at least to a layperson, it could function as a roof deck or as a walking deck, gathering
Yeah.
space, but it's not engineered to do so.
Right.
It's only engineered to accommodate the roofing material.
Correct.
The sheathing and the, any kind of, you know.
And bad and
Right, exactly,
Right.
thank you.
and
Thank you.
bad
Yes,
weather,
exactly.
right? Some rain.
Yeah.
So
And-
well,
Yes.
there.
I mean,
if I-
engineering, ultimately, you can engineer anything, right?
And if I can add
but-
to that, just from the building code and
Yes.
safety perspective, you know, for a roof deck that is actually used that way, you would have to have guardrails or protection for falls. You have to have accessibility, so you have to have sort of permanent access. You can't have like a pull-down, you know, ladder
Okay.
from inside the house or
Gotcha.
something like that, right? So you have to have the permanent stairs that meet certain requirements,
Okay.
right? And then I learned, this was new for me, that there's some minimum electrical wiring and lighting, you know,
Okay.
again, for safety purposes, you know.
And so if we have all of those other sort of related pieces there, it seems like it would make sense for us to allow there to be second story decks on roofs.
It would definitely be feasible, you know, to make it safe, you know, from that building code perspective. And then the question that we asked is wide versus narrow, and then single family versus multifamily. And we as staff thought that where we find physical space constraints, it kind of makes sense to be accommodating, even on a second story. On the wider lots, the physical space constraint is not there. So the question then is, what is our philosophy as far as the design of the community and the appearance and the size, the perceived size of a building? Do we want somebody on effectively the third floor of a single-family home on those wider lots looking down towards the neighbor's property? Right, is it necessary? Or, you know, there's different perspectives. You can say we want to be flexible and allow property owners to develop their property sort of to the maximum extent, you know? Or you can take a different approach, like you said. It's not necessary to address any constraint. And also from that design perspective, our code, as I showed you earlier, tends to favor gabled roofs, pitched roofs, as sort of a kind of design as an aesthetic, you know? So it allows those pitched roofs to go up to 32 feet versus a flat roof. So the code has kind of, let's say, a tendency, or it leans in favor of pitched roofs. So that's another factor to consider. Also, when I was doing a little bit of research about where have we permitted these decks on the top of the second floor, I kind of used Google and just tried to scan through the city. And I did not find, you know, a lot of decks. It was mainly on multifamily properties, but in the core of the R1 zone, it was all pitched roofs. It was just a few flat roofs. So historically, the community design included primarily pitched roofs. That's just another factor, you know, if you have an architectural preference, in other words.
So for today's purposes, you just want us to give you the go-ahead to try and create language to add to the code?
Well, yeah,
we even more specific than that, to hopefully address like the specific issues, like which zone should be permitted, which narrow versus wide lots, and the R1 primarily. Do we allow it on primary those are the questions that we want to address. And I think they can
So-
be answered pretty.
Right, and it's
Pretty-
almost like affirming what we've been doing right now,
yeah.
which is, like I said, for R1 wide lots, we've been allowing it over the first floor area, but not on the second floor, the roof of the second floor. That's practice. When it comes,
Yeah, that would be a good approach. And then we can take a sense of what the commission would like to do on each of those topics, if that's okay with Chair and the commission.
And then if I can just add one more question is, does the commission want to see the changes before we transmit them to the city council? Or does the commission feel comfortable having staff make these changes without you seeing them?
And skip
Either
the second
way,
meeting.
we can bring it back at the next meeting. It's just up to the pleasure of the commission.
I think it'd be nice to see what it is.
Yeah, only because if I am unclear today about how I communicated what I wanted the change to be, and then, you know, at least I get a second chance to say, oh, maybe that's not really what we meant, when you see it in black and white, rather than in the abstract, I think it would be helpful to see it again, but.
It would be helpful to staff, if I may, to go through these items one by one and just
Yes.
get a good sense of what the
Sure.
commission would prefer. That way we can reflect your will better when
Let's
we
do
bring the
it.
ordinance before you.
It's doable.
So when it comes to the zones, I will just phrase the question this way. Is there an objection to allowing rooftop decks, whether it's first floor or second floor in any of the residential zones? Are we comfortable allowing that in some fashion in all three of these zones?
Yes.
Okay, so we're okay with R1, R2, and R3. And then with regard to specifically the R1 zone that has standards for 25-foot lots and lots that are wider, are we okay with allowing rooftop decks in either on narrow lots and wide lots? We can go into the restrictions in the next question. Or not at all. Yes, if we want to add narrow lots to
Yeah,
that.
add the narrow lots on.
Okay, great, so both 25-foot and wider lots. Now, do we want to allow them on?
When you say that, though, would you,
Yes,
do you mean 25-foot or narrower?
yes, technically speaking, yes. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
25-foot wide lots.
I see. So we're saying including that one more foot into the rest of it. Okay.
Great,
So all lots, is that what we're saying? All residential lots is really what we're saying?
right,
Okay, there we go. Now we're together.
great,
It's like, why 25?
terrific.
Okay. That's the narrowest. Yeah, I'm like, all right.
Now,
Right,
when it
because it was
comes
25
to,
feet and 1 inch. We were like, that's a wide lot, and they were included. All right, fine.
when it comes to primary versus accessory structures, it sounds like we're comfortable allowing them on both primary and accessory structures. There may be some restrictions, right?
Are they currently only on accessory structures?
The code reads only on accessory structures today.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you're asking us
But
to
in
be
practice,
okay
we've
with
been-
narrow and wide lots being able to have a balcony or rooftop deck on the second story, which we
On-
historically haven't done.
I'm just
Are we on
distinguishing
C?
between structures right
we're on
now.
C.
We'll see, primary and accessory.
So the next question will cover the specifics. Yeah, so,
Oh, I see, got
What
you.
is C?
I didn't, okay.
yeah,
So we're saying, for C, we're saying the main structure and/or an accessory structure.
yes,
It's okay.
That it would be okay.
Yeah.
Because right now, you can only do it on the accessories.
right.
And we're saying,
And,
primary makes sense.
Okay.
And then D is gonna get into the.
Great, so
the-
now on
the
D,
reads.
that's where we can have a little
Okay.
conversation and clarification.
Okay.
So, do you want them on accessory structures and primary structures on over the first floor only? Or do we want them on top of the second floor as well? And we can treat the type of structure separately if you like. So, today, the code on those wider lots allows them only above the first floor of a detached accessory structure. So a question about detached accessory structures might be, do you want to allow it on top of the second floor of a detached accessory structure also? Or just limit it to just over the first floor?
On a wide lot? We didn't specify that.
Yeah, we can, if you want to make a distinction, yes, we can.
Well, because you have except R1 wide lots.
That's kind of what we were thinking, that on R1 wide lots, to permit it on the second floor of a primary structure, but not on the wide lots. This language is a little short, sorry, it's a little misleading, but let me just kind of let's treat them separately, primary and accessory structures. So, and we can go to the narrow and
D1
versus
and
wide, yeah.
D2 or something.
Yeah. So, on accessory structures, and if it makes a difference, if it's wide or narrow, we can split it up. They're allowed only on top of the first floor. Do we want to allow them on the second floor on detached accessory structures?
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's the setback for accessory structures in the R1?
Great. So in the R1, accessory structures on the side can provide 10% the width of the lot. But if they are in the rear third of the property, of the lot, they can go down to a 0 setback.
So on the sides, it's 10%. On the back, it could be 0.
Yeah, exactly. In the rear part of the lot on the side, it can be 0 for accessory lots.
And the side. Okay. So it could be in the corner, essentially, if it's in the back.
Yeah.
Got it. It could be the corner of the lot. Got it. And
So if they have a deck on top of them, on the first floor,
I see.
or even on the second floor, you know, we can decide, do we want to allow them on the second floor? Is
Because
one question.
because right now, currently, we would allow it over the first floor
Of an accessory unit.
of a detached accessory.
Right. So
Now,
do
to
we
Paul's
allow
point-
two-story accessory?
We allow two-story accessory structures. The second floor typically has to be stepped back from the
But more
property
stepped
line.
back,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because of that, that's also kind of indicative of how we treat roof decks over that first floor, is that the roof deck, the railing has to be set back.
Right.
So it prevents people from putting up their, either a parapet or a guardrail all the way to the edge, which is in essence in line with the property line. You have,
Right.
I mean, 2-3 feet, I mean, one could argue, well, what does that really achieve? But what it's really achieving is you're more in line with what you would be allowed to be standing at if that were a second story.
Right. Okay. And then maybe if you fall, you don't fall into your neighbor's backyard.
So is your recommendation to allow on accessory structures, the decks on first and second floors other than R1 lots?
Oh, great.
Wide
So
lots.
that's a good question. So we believe that on accessory structures, we're not 100%, but keeping it at the first floor seems adequate to address people's needs. In other words, accessory structures don't necessarily need it on top of the second floor.
Okay, so we don't want to do that.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But this is open to your preferences as well. This is kind of our opinion that, you know,
they're good
on
with
an
that.
accessory structure, it may not be necessary to go to the second floor with a deck.
I'm fine with that too.
On the first floor, it would be okay and expanding it into the narrow lots as well, you know.
So now if we go to, if none of us want the second story, we're fine with the way it is on the first story. But now we're going to the primary.
The primary structures,
Residence, yeah.
yes. So on those, we've been permitting it on top of the second floor in the R3 and the R2 zone. We haven't had a lot of situations where it was requested on a narrow lot in the R1 zone. but then you have some similar constraints. So I think staff would say, well, maybe even
What
on
about
those
if we
narrow
limit
lots.
it to R1 25 lots,
Right, so, the,
25-foot lots? If we say R2, R3, and R1
narrow lots.
narrow lots.
Would that be okay with the rest of the commission?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Yes. Allowing, decks on the top of the second floor
Yes.
of homes in the R3 zone, in the R2 zone. In the R1 zone, only on those lots that are 25 feet wide, but not allowing them on lots that are wider than 25 feet in that R1 zone.
And that's what this lady, I think you had her wrong. She was saying 25 feet or less.
Yeah, she wants a small lot, and I
Yeah.
think we're good. I think we
Okay,
covered
okay,
her.
just
I-
making sure.
Yeah, no, I think we took care of her. Hopefully Lady Gray is happy somewhere. I think this is the exact part where I keep going, do I have a problem here? And I
Yeah.
think, again, in terms of consistency, so we're saying someone has a wide lot in the R1. Their neighbors are in narrow lots. They can go up 2 stories plus a deck, but we're saying because theirs is 26 feet wide, they can't have a second story. So the architecture, so the skyline is one of these, and the only difference is that I had a 26-foot or a 30-foot lot, and everyone around me is at 25, and they can go all the way up to 2 stories plus a deck.
Right.
I
The-
don't
Yeah.
like
See what
it.
you're saying.
Now, if I may point out a couple of things. Number one, those 25-foot lots are usually on the same block.
That's what I was gonna say.
Well,
They're
Like
separated,
standard,
they're
right?
separated by streets from other lots, and then in addition, we don't have 26-foot lots.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
like,
the next-
whatever the
next
next
width up
side
is
would be.
usually around 35, 40, and then it just goes up from there.
Sure, but the
Yeah.
idea is that someone could have a narrower lot and have, go up 2 stories plus a deck, and then their neighbor
That's right.
or the block next to them,
Mm-hmm.
they'll look visual,
Yeah, I just
they're
wanted to
gonna look
point out.
narrow either case,
Yeah.
but one is gonna have 2 stories plus a deck, and the other ones we're gonna say no,
Yes.
because
No, that's a
theirs
good
is
point.
But they're
wide.
at 35 feet, that's 10 feet more is the next size, he's saying.
Yeah, but
That's a significant, I lived in a skinny lot, it's a significant difference, and if you walk down Standard Street or with a lot of the skinny lots in a row, they are all on, it goes skinny, 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 and then there's like this beautiful craftsman. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole El Segundo's like that, it's eclectic, even like I remodeled our house and we have the roofs everybody likes, but it's a big lot, I don't need a roof. We didn't design a rooftop deck on that, cause we have a front yard and a backyard.
and I would argue that that's cool for you.
Uh-huh, but I should have put a deck in on top of all the
I
other
mean,
space
that
I
sounds
added?
cool for you. I'm just saying, do we then say to an owner with a different aesthetic to tell them that they can't have a second story deck when everyone else around them could have one? And it's only because
That's a point.
their lot is slightly wider.
To
Could be
Mr.
slightly
to
wider.
Mr. Christian's point, I just wanted to point out that I did talk to a property owner, has a larger lot, and they were interested in putting I think it's a green roof,
Right.
like a garden basically on their
Second
roof.
floor?
I
or the-
think it was on top of the ground of the, it's a 2-story building, but I think it has a 1-story section
Oh,
where they
okay.
wanted to put the green
Sure.
roof. But I'm just saying,
And
somebody
that
might.
We're not allowing that
But that
now.
we would allow that anyway, right? Under
Right,
this
yeah,
is
right.
on the
On,
first
on,
floor.
on a first
Yeah, so
floor.
how many people
We would-
with bigger lots are looking to put in decks?
Oh, I don't know, but I'm just
Sounds
saying.
like none.
Right, and,
Well,
and,
there's
and
none
to
in-
what Paul was
there's
saying,
none
his
yet.
kind of windshield survey through Google Aerial has really,
Windshield
I know it's
survey.
anecdotal,
Yeah.
but
I
there's a
don't know,
lot
that
to say
doesn't
about
worry
that.
me as much because of the character of the neighborhood. Like, Standard is one of the oldest streets in town, that's why the lots are so narrow. The east side of town has the big wide lots, it's like newer. So, somebody with that, and the intent behind, this is the lawyer in me, is like the intent behind it is the same as townhouses and condos because they don't have that outdoor living space. When you are in a regular size lot house with a front yard and a backyard, what more outdoor living space do you need? You have a front yard and a backyard.
But right now, you guys would allow a deck on top of the second floor, correct? That's what you're-
Today, we would not allow
You would not.
a.
Yeah, we
the
wouldn't,
way
top of the
right?
second
So,
Second floor.
and we're adding in that you could now, but only in a narrower lot. And I get, my only objection is I don't know why we're leaving the wide lots out of the party, out of the roof
'Cause they
deck
don't
party.
need it.
But who decides that they need it or
Well,
not?
because the standard house, I only had a front yard. Because of the way that narrow lot was, our garage was the back, and then there's the alley. So we had a, whatever you wanna call it, what did you call it, a balcony? Whatever, a deck.
green roof, yeah.
Off above our garage, that gave us a little more outdoor space, cause we did not have a backyard. We didn't have a backyard, big lots.
2
have-
blocks from Rec Park, you could argue that you didn't need a backyard,
Oh
because you
my
had a
gosh.
giant block, you have a
You
giant park 2 blocks
Take your
away.
nursing twins and 3-year-old in diapers.
People do it
to
every
Rec
day.
Park
People
from
do it
there.
all the time.
And I did, but come on, I mean.
I'm just
that-
saying, people do it all the time. So it's a matter of taste and opinion.
No, the
whether
balcony
you
was helpful.
need a rooftop deck or not, and why. And I'm just saying,
I think that is
like,
part of the intent behind the code was, because that's why the condo, I mean, we know the people that live on Granite, Virginia, that have that third floor, because they don't have outdoor space.
Okay, so what do we do now?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, this is sort of a philosophical issue, and there's perspectives that are legitimate on either side. The question is,
Where do you land on
where
it?
does the commission feel is an
yeah,
appropriate?
I mean, we can vote.
way to go,
I don't
yeah.
mind. But I think we agree on literally everything else. That's the only place where there's any contention.
I mean,
From what I can tell.
If I may, I mean, if Commissioner Christian wants to get a straw poll from the, to see if what he's indicating is something that could gain traction?
Can I ask, is there any other option between by right or prohibit, like another layer of review for a second story wider lot in the R1 that wants to do? I mean,
Right.
could
Well, I
it
mean-
be, I'm just asking.
Right. No, I mean, as you know, I mean, we could be, what I would kind of think would be almost draconian is to require someone to have an AUP. I mean, but it's a discretionary action, and so there's certain findings, et cetera, that would have to be made, or an adjustment. But I think I think in this community, I think we've prided ourselves, and it seems like the residents and council have prided ourselves on really reducing layers of bureaucracy and having really strong, like, standards that hit the mark and say, this is what you can do. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do here, is to make it much more clear for that. So, all due respect to Mr. City Attorney, it bodes like another layer of
I guess.
a process, if you will.
I guess if I can just add 2 cents, I'm also thinking that the neighbors might have an opinion if I'm on I don't know what the setbacks would be, but the idea is if you have an additional level of review, that would allow neighbors who object to it to come to the city and say something. I'm just throwing that out there. But,
You're right, it does give someone
Yeah.
the ability to do it.
yeah. But we can easily prohibit it now and then always allow it later. It's much harder to allow it and then take it away. Just my 2 cents.
Well, right now, it's not allowed. So, I mean, we all know that, at least on the second, it's on, yeah.
So, in my opinion, Mark is taking it from nothing to the floodgates being open. I like stopping at the narrow lots, because at least it's adjusting a policy, but not all the way.
Yeah, okay. We can vote. It's fine. I'm not I'm okay being alone in it. So if everyone else is everyone else is fine with that
City
restriction.
council may tell us to pound sands. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
right? So I don't know. They could. Someone may talk to them and tell them, Mark wants to open the
Anonymously.
floodgates. Wants to
He
open the
wants
floodgates.
everyone to be allowed in on the
Everyone.
balcony party.
Right.
But if someone with
And-
with a wider lot wanted to come in, they'd have to get a variance for that deck on, okay.
Yeah.
I tend to not like variances, because to me, what it means is we're going to selectively enforce the code, right? And it gives this opportunity for it to be unevenly or unfairly enforced or not. And so if we're thinking about it today, we can decide, and then we don't have to worry about these variances later. So to me, making it fair for everybody in the R1 makes the most sense, but I could be voted down.
Jasmine, do you want to take a vote for that?
Well, I mean, I think
If somebody wants to make a motion.
if you want to make a
one way
motion,
or
I
the
to
other.
consider that we'll, that we direct staff to also allow second-story rooftop decks throughout the R1, regardless of the
Throughout
width.
R1.
I mean, that's,
Is that okay, so is that
you can
how
make
we
that
would
motion. If you get a second, then the commission can go ahead and,
Okay,
I would like to make a motion to direct the staff to draft the code update to include second-story rooftop decks in the R1 zone,
regardless of lot width.
throughout the R1 zone.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
It died right here.
This is died. So the commission can continue to discuss and come up with, and continue to give us feedback on the
Or another
item.
motion.
for the reverse, like everything else?
No, but I think if there's agreement that, yeah, there's a consensus that
Yeah.
it put at least this issue to bed, that, you know what? We're okay with making that distinction of allowing for, or directing staff to draft the ordinance to allow for rooftop decks over a second floor on only narrow or 25-foot wide lots. R1 25-foot wide lots.
Which was your recommendation?
Which was
On
our,
the primary
which is our
structure.
recommendation and kind of what we've kind of, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I can't say it's been our practice because right now it does not allow it at all.
And there
But-
may be no desire
But we do
for it.
see, to your point, Commissioner McCaverty, is there is kind of a nexus in terms of the limitations, if you will, that a narrow 25-foot wide lot has, that can also be seen with R3 lots, because there are other factors and other criteria and other variables that affect why they can't, produce, some open space, usable open space.
Okay,
And then E, do we need to go down to E?
we haven't done it yet, right?
The E is whether or not to require additional setbacks for rooftop decks beyond the minimums in the code for like the main structure itself, the structure itself. So
And your
In-
recommendation is
to-
yes?
today, our recommendation would be for the detached accessory structures that would allow them on top of the first floor to include additional setbacks, because we want to avoid a deck above a detached accessory structure right at the property line.
And that's what you showed us in that other drawing earlier, right?
Yeah,
That was a proposal.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
So-
Today, that additional setback is only required in that one instance in the R1 zone on the wide lots. There is, but it's not a requirement in other zones, and on narrow lots. So our recommendation would be to carry that language to the other situations as well in the other zones.
So Paul, now that we went through the 5 recommendation, what's next now?
That covers all the questions we had for you. And if you want to confirm that that's your desire as a commission for us to draft the ordinance that way, then we will go ahead and draft it that way. And I think you wanted to see the exact language at your next meeting. And this is, I think, clear enough direction for us. And I think we can update the ordinance and bring it back to you, hopefully in final form at your next meeting. Yeah.
We could shoot for that.
I mean,
If-
it
if
looks
for
like
some
we
reason-
Worst
agreed,
case, we can.
we agreed with all
continue,
your
yeah.
recommendations, so I
Right.
assume you guys were ready to go with. We agreed to everything, so.
We should continue the
So,
public hearing.
so yeah,
we don't
so
have
I was
to
gonna,
renotice it,
right,
yeah.
so I would suggest, hearing your direction, just to kind of memorialize it, you could make a motion, vote on that, and the motion would be to, continue this so that staff can come back with an updated draft ordinance that addresses the roof deck issue as discussed and directed by you all, and I think we got some good, clear direction on that, and continue to the next meeting.
So we need a motion for,
Could we do that? Yes, that would be
Yeah.
great.
anyone? All right, Steve. Yes, motion to, yes, Tito.
Okay.
I think it'd be what, motion to continue?
Yeah, I guess motion to continue the next meeting to allow staff time to amend the draft ordinance to address the rooftop decks in accordance to the planning commission's direction.
All right.
Is that good, Mr. City Attorney?
Okay, there's a second.
And I'll take votes. Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner McCaverty,
Aye.
Commissioner Christian,
Aye.
Vice Chair Inga.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
thank you, Paul. Next item, new business. Do we have any new business?
None.
No. Thank you. Any unfinished business?
Nope.
No. Any reports from the Community Development Department?
No, nothing to report out today.
Thank you. Any report from the commissioners?
I have a report. You know that I'm on the ad hoc committee that City Council member Michelle Keldorf is leading with Michael Allen for special events, and the first one coming up is the World Cup. So everybody mark your calendar for June 13th. It's a Saturday. We are combining a couple things that have been done in the community before. There's been this day of play that our rec park staff has done where it's like old school games are set up, encouraging parents and their kids to just come out and play games, like put the devices down and play some old school games. So we're calling it, and it's still being worked out, but the day of play plus watch party, possibly end with a movie. It's a big deal day, and we're still working on the branding,
Yeah.
but we're trying to maybe do a little play on like the LAFC logo where it'll be like ESDP, like day of play, and make it look soccery, but we're not allowed to say FIFA, whatever, World Cup, and we can't use their logos in any way. But the soccer, it's from 1 to 5. The soccer World Cup game begins at 3 o'clock. And then if Rec Park is okay with it, they were gonna do the movie in Rec Park, not movie in the park that Rotary does different, called Vivo on the following Saturday, so we're combining it back to the 13th, hopefully. So it's gonna be like, come out to Rec Park, play some old school games, and it's gonna be a little bit like 4th of July with community members, maybe like the girls softball team has already been reached out to, and they might have a little tea drill or something. And then other organizations to be there. So it'll be a little bit of that, then you watch the soccer game, and it ends with a movie and popcorn. And the Little League snack bar is going to be open to sell food. I think softball's probably providing popcorn during the movie. It's an opportunity for our community groups to have some money, raise some money too. So stay for the whole thing. If you're a soccer fan, come in and watch the soccer. If you're a big fan of cartoonish movies, it involves the Caribbean, and we feel like those are soccer-oriented countries, and it's all tying together beautifully because it's the Brazil match, and I forget who Brazil is playing, but it's on June 13th at 3 p.m. is when the watch party starts, but come out early and get your play on. So anyway, that's what, our committee's been very busy, and we'll get you that flyer as soon as we have it, which should be like ASAP.
Any other reports? Just to remind you that this Saturday is the Round for Education, so it's going to be a busy activity here in El Segundo. Any report from the city attorney?
Nothing to report, Mr. Vice Chair.
And also, we will have some staff members who will be running that.
Oh,
Not-
wonderful, wonderful.
I will not, I know this physique may fool you otherwise, but I will not be running that. But actually, Paul Samaras will be running that.
All right. Well, thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.